Hey everyone, I'm Katie on the product marketing team. As a quick introduction, I'll be your host. This is our first show and tell in the Select Stars customer series. And today we're featuring Michael Johnston from fintech platform Spreedly, plus Jesse Sherb from Looker, acquired by Google Cloud. And we also have Donny from Census. Some of you in the audience may know Donny already. And before we get started, just want to say that we love any and all questions, any feedback. So please chat us while we're talking. We want to make this conversational. Send us questions in the chat at any time. We'll either answer them directly or save them for a dedicated Q&A section at the end. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Donny to kick off some introductions. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie. Really appreciate it. And just wanted to quickly walk through a couple of intros, and I can kind of go first and then we can kind of pass it along. So I'm Donny, customer data architect at Census. So I help both prospects as well as customers get the most value out of Census as an operational analytics tool, and how they think about kind of the data stacks and can leverage in the different solutions within the ecosystem. Michael, I'd love to kick it over to you for a quick intro.
Yeah, Mike Johnston. I'm the director of business analytics, and also I'm in charge of business intelligence at Spreedly. That means I'm in charge of Looker, all the data that gets ported into it, the visualizations that we create on top of it, as well as a lot of the ad hoc and project-based analysis that we run at our company. Think things like churn analysis, pipeline analysis, kind of so on and so forth, kind of across the different departments. And I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you as well.
And hey, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jesse Sherb. I have been on, on the Looker team for about 5 years now. So through the GCP acquisition as well, I joined the team as a customer engineer. I now work on a team within GCP that builds repeatable solutions for our enterprise customers that utilize both Looker and other elements of the greater GCP data analytics stack.
Great. Thanks, Jesse. And thanks, MJ. I want to jump quickly into today's agenda. So what we want to do is talk through why would you use Census and Looker together. Also want to talk through kind of how does it work. Kick it over to Michael to talk a little bit about kind of their journey at Spreedly with the data stack, as well as his journey specifically into data as well. We would then want to talk about how reverse ETL enables the operational analytics at Spreedly, as well as kind of what are some of the results that have come from implementing Census at Spreedly, and then want to go ahead and have a dedicated time for questions and answers, and then kind of wrap up. That being said, even though the Q&A is at the end, if there are any questions as we go, feel free to just write them in the chat, and we'll either get to them as they come up if there's a good moment, or also at the end. So we do want this to be interactive, and we hope you get a lot out of. We really appreciate you jumping on and joining us for this webinar. So without further ado, want to give a quick introduction to Census and operational analytics. So as you can, when we think about the modern data stack, this often is a hub and spoke model that we work best with. So you see here that we have this Snowflake as that data hub. You have Fivetran, which is that spoke in from different operational tools. You have Snowplow, which is kind of that event capture and ingest for a lot of that behavioral data. And then you see both dbt and Looker that are plugged into that data hub. And then you have Census that spoke out back into your operational tools, able to bring that analytics into your operational systems. This is just a quick overview. So why would you use Census plus Looker? And this is because oftentimes, as Jesse will probably speak about a little bit, a lot of times in the LookML layer, you might have business logic that's defined there. That's a lot of the value that you get out of Looker, is being able to have that business logic live in that tool. But with the Looker and Census integration, you are able to build that those business logic definitions in Looker, but then use Census to reuse that and send that into your different business tools. And this can really significantly like make your workflows more efficient. And we actually have a direct quote from Michael about kind of the ability to test and sync data much faster with Looker, being able to leverage some of the systems that there have already been investment and energy in terms of the business definitions in that tool that now Census can pick up and reuse for you. So with the way that it works is that you'll have a data warehouse connection, and then based on a data warehouse connection, you have to filter on that to then go within the Census models where you will connect to Looker, and we will pull over via the API the derived SQL that comes from the LookML and a Looker look that then Census will run and use the data warehouse connection to run that query and then be able to send that to your downstream tools. So that's how that works. We use the API, and then you can filter it to a specific folder at that level as well.
So I just want to take a moment and just zoom into a piece of the stack that Donny just walked us through on one of those previous slides. So, typically when we see organizations ready to make the leap to scale access to data across the organization, the first natural step in doing so, as indicated on that tech stack that Donny walked us through, is to centralize all of our data sources into a data warehouse. So our SaaS applications, our first-party data, any data partners, providers we're using, and landing that in any SQL-compliant database. In Spreedly's case, that's Snowflake, right? And at this stage, even upstream of tools like Looker and Census, we typically see two problems start to arise. The first is the creation of data bottlenecks. So once the data is landed and centralized in the data warehouse, the only folks at an organization who can then go extract or query that data are folks who have the technical skill set to do so, right? So data teams, data engineers, et cetera. And you end up with a long line of business users who want access to data, want to ask questions of data, start to integrate that into their daily workflows, and they're waiting on a limited pool of technical resources in order to get that. And so what arises from this is this problem that we call data chaos, where essentially business users start to grow impatient and start to go through other means of getting data, like working off of data extracts directly from their SaaS applications, or if they happen to know SQL, writing inconsistent SQL against the database, then perhaps the data team would. And ultimately, you end up with folks who are coming to a meeting all asking the same question and having different answers to that question. So that could be questions like, which of our customers have the highest risk of churning next quarter? Or which of our customers have the highest propensity to buy a product in the next 30 days? And so if you can go to the next slide. So where Looker comes in to address these is by first addressing the low-hanging fruit of having a centralized data model. So we can almost think of this as a data dictionary for the organization, where the data team or the data engineers can codify the business logic of the organization, any of the metrics, any of the data points that we would need. And this will provide governance. So as more and more business users start to access this, we can feel confident that we're all working off of the same definitions and the same business logic as we start to ask questions, right? This also reduces the burden of the data engineers and the data team to really understand every permutation of every question that business users might want to ask. So Looker also provides business users with a UI to be able to query data without having to know SQL or have a technical skill set, right? So through a point and click interface, you can start to ask questions of the data, build reports, etc. And so, for example, perhaps I'm on the customer success team and I want to pull a list of any accounts who have a renewal coming up next quarter, who have a health score less than 25. I can pull that list in Looker, and then this is where Census comes in. Let's say I want to take that list and I want to run a nurture campaign through Marketo. And I want to, deem these accounts at risk in our CS and our CRM platforms. And I want to target ads against them on our social media platforms. And so Census now takes this information and syncs it across all of our business applications. So we can not only just take the information in Looker for reporting and analytics purposes, but really start to integrate it into all of our operational workflows as well.
So yeah, just wanted to ask about kind of a little bit about your story and kind of what led you to a career in data and at Spreedly.
Yeah, so I'll go back, kind of way back. Think like 9-10 years ago. I was actually teaching at the time, so I was teaching algebra and AP calculus, and I loved working in math, and I loved kind of data from that perspective. But I really wanted to get into business, and so I at that time I actually looked up, what's kind of a 10 careers that could get me into a 10 to 40 person startup, and one of the things that came up was FP&A, which is financial planning and analysis. And so I was like, that seems like a good trajectory to start with. So I got into FP&A, and by kind of hook or crook, I managed to land a job at a telecommunications broker. He was selling international used telecommunication devices, and he's like, sure, you know what? You seem like an interesting guy. You boxed in college. I'll take a shot on you. And so I ended up becoming his finance manager, and helped him manage that business as well as his bouncy house business for about 1.5 years. And it was great because I got to kind of learn finance and kind of get my feet wet. And then about 1.5 years later, I had the opportunity to go work at a startup. So it was a tech startup, kind of fast growing. They were just kind of getting into finance, and they were just, willing to take a shot on a guy they thought, could maybe handle it. So they gave me finance and operations, and that's kind of where it really started. So when I joined, there's a couple of things from that takeaway. One, it was really hard to get data out of our back end, and at the time, someone was like using something called SQL. I was like, I'm not sure. But I was like, this seems important. I should learn this. And I was actually given some advice by an executive. They're like, don't waste your time learning SQL. Let other people learn it. And then you just like become an executive. And then you never have to actually learn it. They'll just know it. And that just never felt right to me. I'm the kind of person who likes to understand how things work. And so I was like, that's great, but I'm going to invest some time learning this because I really want to be able to pull the data and understand what's happening. The moral of that story, though, was that it was not easy to get the data. And I spent about 1 to 2 hours every morning of every day creating a daily report for the executive team. And so I would pull data out of systems, format it, export it in, and then I would print it, and then I would deliver it to them. I did that every day. And while it was terribly taxing for me from a mental energy drain, I learned something really important, that it's really important to understand the business and what's going on. And the only way to do that is to be using your data and operationalizing it. And so while it was tough for me as an individual to be doing this thing, I got to see the executives using this information every day to drive decisions. And it actually harkens back to this strategy. I forget, one of the VPs from Amazon was saying, Jeff Bezos kind of coined this concept of ruthless execution as a strategy, right? So it's like if you are incrementally improving the business every day, that in itself is going to drive you to the promised land. And so that's where I kind of dipped my toes into the water of kind of data and analytics. I ended up leaving that company, taking a director of FP&A at another company that the previous one had gotten sold. And then when I was at this other company doing FP&A, I had the pleasure of working with the business intelligence team. And I kept thinking to myself, I'm in finance, I'm building these models, I'm working on strategy and execution, and I'm pulling these data sources and trying to help the business. But these people in business intelligence and analytics, they had their pulse on all the data. They understood the data sources. They really understood what things mean, the source of truth. and they had access to everything, and they could build it, and it was always there. And so I was like hooked. I was like, I need to be a part of this. At the time, we were using Click, and it was great. It was a good learning experience. They, again, it's amazing. Everyone's willing to like teach you and let you learn and explore these things. And so I explored and I learned and I got better at these things. And then I moved over to Spreedly about 2.5 years ago. And I had the good fortune of being in charge of the Salesforce migration. And then we implemented kind of a more modern data tech stack, which you had talked about earlier, Snowflake, Fivetran, our operations systems. Yep, right here. And so so when I moved over, we put in place Snowflake and Snowpipe, and that was to get our behavioral data, the customer data popped into Snowflake. And at the time, we really thought it was a data lake. So we were just pulling all that data in there, but it was totally unstructured. And then the thought process was, well, let's bring in this BI tool, and you can put your semantic layer, right? Your semantic layer, as Donny mentioned, where your business rules live. It can live in many places, right? dbt on top of Snowflake, in Looker. And so for us, it just made sense at the time to use Looker. We don't even have dbt fully set up, so we're really leveraging Looker for our entire semantic layer here to build out our business rules. And so we invested a ton of time and energy pulling in these operational tools, pulling in the right tables, joining them the correct way, and building out a lot of measures with derived tables and pre-aggregates and everything over about a year. And now what we have is kind of our, it's really our corpus of truth, right? So you can look at data across systems the way that we ask and think about it. So when we say things like, show me merchant of records revenue in Latin America, that's 3 data points across 3 systems that can be brought up immediately because we've built that business logic in our semantic layer, and everyone at the company can leverage it. So really the driving philosophy there was democratize data and let this be a self-service tool.
And MJ, just one thing there too that I think is valuable to mention, which is the fact that kind of all of that data is like, yes, you've built that interface in Looker, you built the semantic layer and those definitions there, which is super great and like is thinking about kind of the user experience, but also all of that data is centralized within your hub. So kind of when we think about kind of that hub and spoke that I was talking about all the way at the beginning, that was something that you already had when kind of we first had that conversation.
That's right. That's right. So we have it all centralized to that Snowflake, which opens up a lot of possibilities.
That's
Do you want me to? I can keep going on about this, or we can go on to the next question.
Yeah, let's go ahead and jump onto that next one in terms of kind of when we first had that conversation. Kind of what was that problem that kind of triggered you to start looking for a tool like Census? And I think kind of the two are a little bit related in terms of kind of the alternatives that you considered, or in this case, kind of we're potentially using a little bit of.
Yeah. You'll love this. So it's funny because Spreedly's value proposition has to do with speed to payments, right? So we help people scale, and our problem was all about speed and simplicity. So we were launching a free production trial, and part of that launch, we needed to communicate to our customers based on where they were in their journey. So based on number of calls they'd made and actions they'd taken. And to do that, we needed data in Salesforce. Now, all that data lived in Snowflake. Now, at the time, when we had migrated to Salesforce, we had actually leveraged Workato to push data from Salesforce to NetSuite. And I had done some asking around, and I had done some kind of polling of people, and they're like, yeah, Workato may not be the best fit for this use case, but it could probably solve it. But there's probably some better tools out there that you can use for reverse ETL. And so we attempted it with Workato, and after a couple of weeks of kind of working through it and increasing complexity to get what we wanted, I just reached out to Census and I'm like, if we can just get these data points into this tool by the end of the, like either the end of this week or early next week, done. Like I will sign. Like, let's just solve this problem. And so that's really what triggered our reaching out and looking for a tool like Census.
Yeah, No, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of that complexity, was the complexity about the fact with the looker logic, that in terms of the different pieces of where that semantic layer lived, as you described it, or kind of was it more so about the management of the API integrations between tools? Can you just talk a little bit more, a little bit about that complexity piece, and also kind of if Looker was kind of in play at all through that initial phase?
So no, actually, I was comfortable, building the logic anywhere. I was just like, listen, I just need to pull the data in. If you need the logic needs to exist in the tool or in Snowflake, I'll build it wherever it needs to be. I just want a simple tool that can pull the data in on a regular frequency. That's just appending or creating. So that was really the original, and then the whole concept of Looker and being able to leverage that. I mean, that was icing on the cake, and I actually think that's part of the reason we accelerated our onboarding. I remember connecting with you, Donny, being like, "Hey, I need this help," and you're like, "Well, you've got Looker. Like, we could try just using a Looker look," and I'm like, "Oh, done." I was like, "I don't have to work with the data engineer. I don't have to think about involving anyone else, and then our marketing operations person can manage this going forward." I was like, "Thank you." I was like, "I don't need to be spending, hours a day or a week when things break or logic changes, but being involved in these things, because our goal is to automate as much as we can. And as we continue to automate things, it's so important that the operational people can just own those pieces of automation, because we keep building them and building them. And people on the data team, they'll get stretched thin. These hours add up, and it's just really helpful if you can have the operational teams own it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that fits very well into kind of how we think about kind of Census as a product that spoke being not only just the data transfer, but really bridging the data team and the ops teams, and making an easy and to use and enjoyable experience. So kind of speaking more about that ops side, that business case, kind of with the some of these marketing flows that we were talking about. Kind of what is you've already talked a little bit about this, but just wanted to talk through kind of how that data, once it's in Salesforce, how is that actually leveraged within the use case of Spreedly, kind of around maybe some of those trial emails.
Yeah, and I'll talk to the trial emails, but also allude to, we have multiple use cases here. And so to your point, the purpose is like, how do we operationalize this data? And so the first use case was, how do we communicate to our customers based on where they are in the customer journey? Before, what we did was, it was just time-based cadence. It was, every 7 days you got this type of email. And it wasn't influenced by where you're at or what you're doing or what your challenges were. But what we did was we put in kind of a three different types of email kind of trees that basically communicated to the prospect based on the behavior of the prospect. So if you connected to one of our gateways, let's say, for example, you connect to Stripe, we now know you connect to Stripe, and we now know that you're this much further in your journey than someone who has just added a test payment method. And so we can say, hey, wow, congratulations, you've connected to Stripe. Why don't you start our production trial? There you can try some test production calls on that production gateway. And so, so really what we had to do was pull that data into Salesforce, and then pull it into Pardot to create these campaigns that then trigger based on the behavioral data. And so it was really, behavior-based marketing was kind of the core goal, and we were able to achieve that with 5 to 6 data points that really were stamps telling us, did you and when did you hit these flags indicating some sort of behavior.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And kind of, I think, specifically to some of those specific definitions for those different kinds of behaviors, and I would love to hear a little bit kind of from Jesse about some of these kind of derived metrics, or some of the like the value of having that logic be in that semantic layer of LookML, and kind of why that might make sense within the context of that use case to live in Looker.
Yeah, I mean, I love hearing use cases like that, right? About just getting so much smarter about when we're targeting customers, based on where they're at in the funnel or where they're at in their customer journey, and really being able to, implement that type of automation across the board. And I'd say one of the benefits, there's multiple benefits of having this logic live in Looker. I think the first one goes back to this data governance piece, right? So again, if we just talk about things like health score as a metric, so this is what the standard metric the entire company agrees upon on, is a customer healthy or not, or what the risk of his churn. If we can all agree on the same definition of that, right, then if the marketing team is implementing workflows and the CS team is implementing workflows and the billing and finance team are implementing workflows, we're all working off of the same definition of what high risk is or low health score is. And so I think the governance piece is critical, but what's even more critical goes back to something Michael mentioned earlier, which I would just want to emphasize again. It's that you can implement these workflows without having the data team or data engineers have to have their hand in every workflow you want to implement, right? You give access to business users to be able to extract this information and integrate it into these other tools, that you can start to really put the operational onus on the different teams and the different business users, and really leverage your data team and data engineers for what they do best, which is focusing on your infrastructure, focusing on your data modeling, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that was part of this initial part, in terms of when you think about only having to build these business definitions once, and then you're able to reuse them everywhere. It speaks to the hub and spoke. It speaks to kind of the semantic layer, that corpus that you were talking about, MJ. That's all like where you can really get a lot of value out of this as an integration and out of the spoke of operational analytics. I think we're coming a little bit on time, but I do want to definitely want to spend some time here in terms of the return on analytics. And MJ, that was a term that I had been introduced to from you, but just being able to quantify like the initial impact that Census plus Looker has been able to have at Spreedly, and kind of what are the metrics, whether they're preliminary or kind of where they are, but how this is standing out the most to you in terms of your day-to-day workflows.
Yeah, and it is preliminary, but I'll kind of speak to ROA at a high level, then talk about the metrics that we're looking at to measure and understand. So, when we think about ROA, what we really want to do is tie business impact to analytics. So when we're thinking about either prioritization or operationalizing the data, we want to understand what business initiative are we impacting. So in this situation, we're talking about helping customers through their customer journey. So there we could look at, how many customers are converting through the pipeline who engage in this new nurture campaign as opposed to the old one, and are we able to help them convert better through the pipeline? Another use case that we're using Census plus Looker for is highlighting or calling out customers to our SDRs who are taking certain actions that would indicate that they either need support or that they're a really likely candidate to use our tool. And so today they have a lot of demographic information and firmographic information, but they don't have a lot of behavioral and product information. And so what that requires them to do is live in Salesforce and live in a dashboard like Looker, which operationally that just doesn't work well when you talk about the importance of turnaround time. And so what we're able to do is we're actually able to highlight certain customers within Looker based on triggers. This is a very active, or this is a highly promising customer based on the actions they've taken, and bubble that up to them so they can say, wow, I've got 30 people that I need to talk to in the next 24 hours, but I really need to talk to these 5 because they've taken these actions. And so again, understanding the conversion rate of customers as they move through the funnel. Candidly, our month-to-month sales is up quarter over quarter. And this quarter we've started using it versus last quarter. So I can say that, I can't attribute it directly yet, but I can tell you that sales haven't gone down. And so we're constantly looking at this conversion rate and kind of analyzing like how it's helping. Intuitively, it makes a lot of sense to meet customers where they are. And so I think it's just a matter of tweaking it and better understanding the journey and helping them along it, and then measuring it as we go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think especially with it becomes a difficult problem to attribute sometimes as your business is also growing and as sales are kind of naturally also growing, kind of how be able to define the exact impact of one variable that changed, because there are often multiple variables that change. But I think that being able to understand and have some rationale and some of that domain knowledge that you do have, there are definitely pieces that can lend to a more quantitative kind of approach toward as more time passes, and as you're able to see that kind of all of that noise kind of smooth out a little bit with time. And I want to hear this from both MJ and Jesse, but first from MJ, in terms of what is that advice that you would give to data folks or teams that are looking to drive more business impact, and then kind of also love to hear from Jesse as well.
Yeah, so I think so I'll say a couple things. I think that for people in kind of the data space, it's really important that we start with the business question or the business impact, right? So you use the words business impact up here, but like, what does that mean? Typically, it's there's some drivers in the organization or some KPIs, right? Key performance indicators, something that the business is measuring its success against, whether that's revenue growth, logo expansion, customer retention, some KPI. And then starting with that KPI, I would say, my biggest piece of advice is talk to the people in operations, talk to the people who are doing the selling or in CS, and understand like what do they do to do their job, and ask them questions around, like, how are things going? Like, are there ways that we could provide you information, or are there workflows that are clunky that we could help augment, that could help you do your job better? Because at the end of the day, there's always some really simple solutions that we can take that will help the teams operate better with data, right? It's a game of prioritization in this world, right? There's abundance of things to do. You could spend your time as like a hamster on a wheel, but if we can help guide you and say, hey, focus on these 3 things versus these 30 things, or work in this way, or here's access to data to help you do your job, that's going to really drive a lot more value. And so I'd say start with those teams and pick up on those operational challenges or opportunities, and then help from a data perspective there.
Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, sorry, Jesse, you go.
Yeah, no, I really would just double down on everything Michael just said. I think when folks think about analytics, they think the end product is, pretty charts and dashboards up on the TVs around the office, right? And really, that is the starting point of analytics. If we treat that as the endpoint, we end up with a bunch of dashboards that, sure, they look great, but they're full of kind of what we call vanity metrics, and they're not very operational. And so, to Michael's point, when you're building your analytics stack, or you're even, looking at a more micro lens, or even building a single dashboard, really building it with the end user in mind, and not what they want to see, but what they want to do with that information. So what decision do they want to make, right? What action do they want to take as a result of viewing this information? And from there, you can really start to think of the work streams that you're trying to create and that you're trying to automate. And to Michael's point, again, we can now bridge the gap between analytics, pretty charts and dashboards, and operational workflows. and using, tools like we've mentioned today in order to automate some of those workflows, so that you actually see an impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, I really like both of those points, and I think a lot in kind of I would like to triple down kind of on that piece in terms of being able to have those conversations and understand what is motivating kind of the company, but also like the role as well as that person. Like what are some of those KPIs that they're responsible for, and then thinking about kind of how the data can better help them do their job, whether that's to be more efficient or to also come up with kind of creative solutions to maybe blocking problems or processes that are not ideal. To go back to the why are we doing things this way, and to have the data, like oftentimes sometimes creativity is different, is kind of outside of kind of the analytics or the data folks, kind of top vocabulary choices, but I think that there's a lot of value that you can get from that, in terms of talking to business users and kind of what the problems are that they're thinking about. So I think that was a great discussion, and I hope that that sparks a couple of questions from the audience. I want to say thank on behalf of Census, and I would like to thank everyone for joining, and I would be happy to answer kind of any of the questions that you might have. So please feel free to pop them in the chat, and also want to shout out to our operational analytics club in the Slack community, operationalanalytics.club. We have a lot of great discussions there, and some great Friday coffee chats that happen kind of every 2 weeks, of which there is one this Friday. So would love to see. I saw some community members already here, but would love to see even more as well. So would love to hear some questions and have a couple conversations.
Yeah, feel free to drop questions in the chat for us right now. Thanks, Nate, for linking the Operational Analytics Club. Tony says, how do you see your data teams, marketing, product, finance working together in the future after Census? For Michael.
Yeah, so after we've added Census to the stack, it's funny. We're already seeing different departments start to ask for more information that they can pull into Salesforce. They're like, whoa, wait, hold on. You can pull the specific gateway that a customer has added in the last 24 hours, and we can see that. They're like, and then they ask other questions. Can you pull adoption of this product? Can you pull success rates of this thing? So what it's really doing is, the goal is to, and it doesn't have to be just Salesforce, right? It's any tool that the operational team is leveraging. So for example, our CS team leverages Catalyst. And so being able to pull data from Census into Catalyst is an absolute must, because Catalyst, its value prop is kind of a customer 360 and being able to have a health score. And then likewise, product people, they need to have insights to all these things. And so it's a matter of being able to pull it in. So it's really, constantly doing the assessment of, does that team's tool, that operational tool, does it connect to Snowflake, and can we pull data into it? And will it be accretive there? And so it's, is it operational data, or is it data to do analysis? And so we're constantly evaluating different data points to pull in to the different tools. And I have a long list of things that we're working through as we talk about the different tools and the different data points. But I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you for the question. And thanks, Tony, for the question.
Any other questions we can answer here? If not, we can wrap up and hope to see everyone in the OA Club. Feel free to chat us directly. Keep an eye out on our events page on the getcensus.com website for future events. A lot of us will be at the Databricks Data and AI Summit next week, so hope to see some of you there.